Hello, everyone. My name is Marek Stępień. I work as a front-end developer at Interia, which is one of the biggest portals in Poland. But that's not everything that I do. For the last 9 years, I have been a volunteer contributor to the Mozilla project. And this hat is what I'm wearing today, metaphorically. During the last year, I gave a few talks that were code-heavy. But this time, I decided to do something different, because it's sometimes better to look at the bigger picture. Well, what I want to confess is that I love the web, because the web has some features that the mediums that preceded it didn't have. First, it's participatory, meaning that everyone can publish, everyone can have a website, basically. Everyone can use the content in ways that were not possible before the web. It's egalitarian because every user has basically the same rights and the same possibilities. And in fact, nothing really stops your blog from being the top one result on Google before any, I think, AOL or any big site that will be, basically, you can be the first one, even if you're not a big organization. The web is hackable, and I mean it in a good way. By hackable, I mean that you can influence the content you're receiving. You are not bound to how the original developers of the content wanted it to look like. You can use your browser add-ons or user scripts, user style sheets to make the sites you watch, you visit, completely different. For example, you can use add-ons to add Bing results to Google or the other way around. That's something that was not possible before the web. And another good thing about the web is that the web is basically readable on the code level. You can view source of any web page, and this has been like this forever since the very beginning in the early 1990s. View source is a powerful tool because it's how most of you probably learned how the web works. These four features combine into one that I call simply open. It's not all that constitutes open, but these four features are an integral part of the open web. But what exactly is the open web? Well, Tantek Çelik, the lead developer of IE for Mac and now a Mozilla evangelist, has this definition. The web is open when it gives you the ability to openly do three kinds of things. Publish your content, your apps, your sites in open standards. Open standard is the one that anyone can implement without any royalties or any restrictions. You can code and implement those open standards on your own. You are not restricted by anyone. And you can access and use the content, the code you made, the web apps you made, and the implementations of the standards that you might have made or someone else have made freely without restrictions. And it's always been like this since 1991. This is actually, This is World Wide Web, the first ever web browser made by Tim Berners-Lee in 1991. And Tim Berners-Lee designed the web and this original first ever web browser as a component of the open web. Tim Berners-Lee says the web should be the web in which principles of universality of access are core values. And the core values of the openness were part of the World Wide Web in 1991, because this very first browser included the features like view source and had an integrated code editor, the first ever browser. Okay. But things changed after 1991. The browser market became an arena of competition between two companies, basically Netscape and Microsoft. These browser wars of the late 90s, early 2000s were fought over which of the two companies would own the web. By owning, I mean controlling every aspect of how the web works and what can you do and what can't you do. Netscape was, well, in my opinion, the better one, because they wanted the web to be the area for web applications, and they even said the Windows is a bunch of poorly debugged device drivers. And Microsoft wanted the web to be something not really integral, not really open, but a simple component of Windows. And when Netscape went down, Microsoft won, or at least it looked so. But Netscape, at their last moment, did something revolutionary. They spawned Mozilla, the open source project that originally was meant to only provide code for Netscape products. But over the years, it evolved into a movement whose the biggest aim is not producing Firefox or any web browser, but to promoting the idea of the open web. And Firefox is just a tool for this. Fast forward to 2012 or 11, as on this screenshot. The web today. Today's web is different than the web Microsoft would have wanted 10 years ago with IE6. Thanks to Mozilla, the WebKit project, and the Opera browser, the web kept evolving. The initiatives like WhatWG made the web go forward. Finally, IE had to catch up, and they, I think, caught up with IE9 or IE10. The world has changed. HTML, CSS, JS, the so-called web stack, is everywhere now. Not only on your computers, but on your phones, on your MP3 players, on your smart TVs, on any device that you can imagine. And, well, the browser wars are supposed to have ended, and now most of the browser vendors say that now it's browser love, not browser war. It's not necessarily exactly perfect, but I think it is better than it was. But there are still challenges ahead of us, some of which might remind you of the old Netscape versus Microsoft vendor lock-in browser war. So what are the challenges that are ahead of us? Challenges ahead, the open web. The first major challenge is competition from closed non-web app platforms. By non-web, I mean non-HTML, non-JavaScript, and not open. You cannot view a source of an iPhone app. You cannot hack, and you cannot put Bing results on a Google iPhone app, but you could use a Firefox add-on or an Opera add-on to add the Bing results to a Google site in your browser. So that's a fundamental difference between open web app and closed non-web app like the iPhone apps. Another challenge, single-engine websites. The websites that are supposed to work with only single browser engine. Most commonly, this is WebKit. This goes, it's not compatible with the idea of universal access that was, they quoted from Tim Berners-Lee on the previous slides. And another issue ahead of the open web, proprietary media formats like H.264 and even the so popular MP3. These media formats have their licensing restrictions that are basically incompatible with the idea of openness. If you remember the Tantek Çelik's three points of what constitutes an open technology, H.264 is not, because there are things that are not open and you have additional restrictions that shouldn't be there if the open app is what it's about. And slightly different challenge, because this is not exactly about web technology, but how the web technology is used. The challenge ahead is based on identity issues. By identity issues, I mean we have now social websites that have become the identity hubs, and these identity hubs lead to walled gardens. Example, you go to a blog and it says, log in with Facebook to comment. So you basically cannot comment on a blog post on some blogs if you don't have a Facebook account. So we're putting our content in a walled garden of Facebook. That's not necessarily what it should be. But it's easy. And the thing that some things are too easy might be a problem, because the easy has the price of being non-open. And another challenge ahead of the open web, I think, are software patents. Software patents are a threat to the open source movement, basically. But they are also a threat to the open web in that they also may apply to websites. For example, Amazon's one-click patent in the US is something that's a challenge for the web, because you cannot have a one-click, you cannot build a one-click shop unless you pay Amazon for it. So these are 5 challenges. There are solutions appearing. Solution for closed no-web apps are offline HTML5 apps and open websters. Mozilla is experimenting with building one. Solution for single vendor sites is simply using new techniques like responsive web design, progressive enhancement, and basing everything you do on the web on web standards. Solution for the closed media formats are the open formats like WebM and OGG. And solution for identity issues is, well, the old one was OpenID, and it's still good. But Mozilla is experimenting with a new identity platform, Browser ID, which is basically compatible with the open web principles. And patents are tricky because patents are a political and financial issue. And to change patents, you would have to reform the patent system. That's a political issue. So the solution the solution is to vote smart. That's all what you can do now. But how you can help the open web as an individual? Well, the first thing to do is help yourself first. It might seem weird, but if you do good, if you create good code, you're helping the open web. This link leads to an MDN site with an article about writing future-compatible code. Future-compatible means something that won't break in another browser release. Use the new cool things like responsive web design and progressive enhancement. Code according to the standards. And be careful with vendor prefixes. Vendor prefixes are experimental, might change. The gradient spec changed 2 times since the original implementation in Safari, and it changed last week. So the gradients you wrote until last week might probably stop working next month. So you have to be careful. And don't limit your audience to one vendor, because the web was about to be universal. And iPhone is not the majority of mobile web browsing, because if you take a look at what Paul Peter Koch recently posted, the mobile web is still an Opera majority platform. And don't do browser sniffing. And if you do browser sniffing, don't make it even worse. Don't assume one feature implies another feature. So have you ever seen recently a MediaWiki site like WikiTravel breaking in Firefox 9? It's not Firefox's fault. It's the fault of this code. So they are checking for child nodes, document all, and navigator taint enabled to basically detect WebKit. They fingerprint your browser and decide, based on these 3 properties, if it is WebKit or not. Then Firefox removed taint enabled in Firefox 9. So isKHTML in old MediaWiki is true in Firefox 9, and this isKHTML variable is used to turn on WebKit bugs, workarounds, and when you work around a bug that doesn't exist, things like this happen. And so don't ever do crazy shit like this, because if you do, well, the shipment of fail will arrive. Okay. So you have to make standards the way your company works. You have to assess the possibility of a mobile site being more important than an app. And you should know when HTML apps are better suited for some purposes, maybe not all, than native apps. You can use native HTML5 audio and video in your sites. Get rid of Flash. And if you're using HTML5 websites, if you're building HTML5 websites, you can reuse the code in apps by using platforms like PhoneGap. And some other points you can make to your boss if you want to make a case for the open web in your company. Standards are good. Standards are good because they are not vendor locked in. You can ask your boss, do you want to be dependent on another company? Do you want to be dependent on Apple? Do you want to be dependent on Google? That's an important question, I think. And does limiting your reach to just 2 platforms make sense? And so some might say that making a website that works on every platform is tricky and costly. But is making 5 apps for iPhone, iOS, BlackBerry, Java, whatever, is making 5 apps cheaper than making 1 good website or good HTML5 web app? Another thing you can do is helping others. You don't have to help the others, but when you do, you're just awesome. The first thing you can do as a web developer, you can report all the bugs you find in browser engines. And all browser vendors, from Microsoft to Mozilla, from Apple to Google, let you do that. You can file browser engine bugs at these sites. Every time you find that something doesn't work right in the browser, please try to submit a bug report to the browser vendors. These are the first 4 are completely open. You can browse the bug database and comment on the existing bugs too. Opera and Microsoft don't have an open bug system, but they still let you fill in a form with a bug report. So if you have time and you find something that doesn't work right, please report it. Why? Because the web works the same way on every browser. It's good for interoperability, and interoperability is part of the universalness of the web. But you may say, well, the bug I found is already filed, so why should I care? But you can check, at least on the open bug sites, if the bug has a minimized test case. And if you encounter the bug, you know better what triggers the bug. Make a minimized test case. Make the shortest HTML, JavaScript, CSS code that has the bug and attach it to the bug. If you have some more time, you can try to find if it broke in some previous version. It's something worked in Firefox 8, doesn't work in Firefox 9. 8 to 9 is the regression range. There are tools that let you even narrow the regression range. If you have time, please do that too. And if you're coming from a C++ background, you can try to fix the bug in the 2, 3 open source rendering engines. OK. If you're not into coding or bug reporting, you can still write docs at Mozilla Developer Network. Mozilla Developer Network used to be a Mozilla-oriented site documenting how the Gecko engine works, but it's not true anymore. Mozilla Developer Network over the last year became the Wikipedia for front-end development. All browsers are welcome, and even Google and Apple employees from the WebKit project contribute their documentation to Mozilla Developer Network. On this screenshot, you see MDN opened in Opera with an article on a WebKit property. So if you have time, please contribute. Even fix a typo if you don't have time for anything more complex. But anything you do improves the web. Other ways that you can give back other than contributing. You can experiment with the new technologies that are here. You can share your findings. You can put it on code reuse sites like Doublet or JSFiddle or JSBin or even GitHub. You can try to talk about open web at events near you. Maybe host a Meet.js event in your city if it's not already there. And if you're really into it, you can try contributing to the standards process at ECMA, at W3C, at WebWG. And if that's and this list goes on and on and on, and this site, Move the Web Forward by Paul Irish, lists a lot of ideas for you to contribute, and regardless of how advanced you are, whether you're a beginner or a guru, you can still contribute, and there are ways for you to do it. I think that's all the slides I have now. So if you want to follow up, you can contact me at these addresses. At Twitter, I'm Marcus, and this is my email address. I will post the slides URL soon on Twitter when I get my laptop working again.
What do you think about web-specific prefixes, like
minus WebKit, minus mouse, minus R, right?
Yes, yeah. Because it's not standard yet. So should we use it, or just it will make some diversity?
You can use it, I think, but you have to be careful because things might change. And if you use a prefix, use all of them. Don't just use WebKit, use all the prefixes. But if you use prefixes, you have to keep in mind that things might change and that things might break. So, like I said, the gradient spec changed again. So some of the gradients you made recently might stop working. So you have to keep in mind. And if you use vendor prefix code, you have to be in touch with how the spec changes.
Yes, I would like to ask what SOPA will affect the open web? How much? Oh.
What?
SOPA. Stop Online Piracy
yeah.
Act.
SOPA, I didn't talk about SOPA in my talk, but SOPA basically means the government may pull down the whole hosting provider when one of their clients infringe on copyright issues. So you have a site hosted on, say, DreamHost. Another DreamHost customer infringes, like posting movies or MP3s, and it might happen that it will bring the whole domain down, and the domain will be redirected to a US government site. The technology that the SOPA law is connected to is basically the same software that the Chinese government uses to block political websites. So that's the threat.